I've got a meeting this lunchtime, so I'm hurrying and I'm making a few videos before I do that. And I've just been going through some of the comments on videos this morning, and one of them from a fellow called Cartoon, who leaves comments occasionally, not always that pleasant, who suggests that I'm now having difficulty with my open borders philosophy. I've never had an open borders philosophy, and I want to put that very clearly on the record. I've never advocated open borders. I have read the arguments with care, including John Washington's 2024 book and the Rawlsian tradition from Karen's onwards, and I find the case incoherent in theory and unworkable in practice. And I'd like to give a clear account of why. What open borders actually claim, in their strongest form, open borders rely on three main claims. Moral equality across birthplaces, since nationality and birthplace are morally arbitrary. Restrictions on movement wrongfully privilege some and disadvantage others. Drawing on Rawls, Karen's argues that people choosing principles of justice behind a veil of ignorance would include a basic liberty to migrate. Secondly, the positive sum economics, removing barriers to labour mobility, is said to raise global GDP dramatically, smooth wage differentials and improve efficiency. The claim is not simply that immigration is often good, which it may well be, but that border controls are, as such, are unjust and inefficient, which I'm not so sure about. The borders are portrayed as engines of harm that fuel smuggling, entrench exploitation and criminalise ordinary human mobility. A world with weak or vanishing borders, it is said, would be more egalitarian, diverse and peaceful. That is the thesis in good faith. Now the problems. Open borders confuses a moral aspiration for equal concern with a political framework that makes rights and redistribution workable. Welfare states run on membership, taxation and democratic accountability. If a community cannot set terms for admission and the price of incorporation, it cannot plan housing, schools, clinics, water, transport or green space. The problem is clear in Ireland, in the island of Ireland, where somebody might get a flight to Europe or somewhere from Belfast, come back to Dublin and then find that they've lost their family credit and stuff because there's no record of them having returned to Northern Ireland. That is a failure of the system, not a call for open borders. You can have either universal entitlements or universal entry at will. You cannot guarantee both without collapsing the fiscal base and hollowing the promise. To go back to the example, the problem there is not that somebody has gone through an open border. The problem there is the failure of the British government to police who comes in and who goes out of the border, because they have still crossed the border. And that is the failure, and that has been a failure all the way around in Britain, the failure to account for who leaves the country and who comes into the country. The second reason why the open borders idea is wrong is that it misuses Rawls. Rawls' first principle protects equal basic liberties for members of a constitutional democracy. His second principle governs inequalities within that cooperative scheme, and extending those principles to abolish the boundary of the scheme simply erases the subject that makes the principles actionable. The result is not higher justice, but a category error. And then global models showing big GDP gains are average long-run projections that assume elastic capital, instant institutional absorption and political stability. Real transitions are not averages, they are lumpy and local. And fiscal and infrastructure stresses arrive early while productivity and innovation benefits accrue later and unevenly. Open borders removes the policy lever that manages the intertemporal and spatial mismatch. And to cast migration as freedom fighting is rhetoric, not remedy. Smuggling networks expand when the expected returns are high and enforcement is inconsistent. The right answer is lawful pathways with credible enforcement against exploitation, not a license for any actor to set the admission rate by crossing. If people can depart at will, brain drain hits hardest where institutions are already fragile. Training doctors and engineers only to export them at scale can be catastrophic for the originating country. Open borders answers this with slogans about remittances. That is thin gruel for the places that lose their teachers and their clinicians. Public services operate near their constraints. Housing markets in particular respond slowly. When supply is rigid, rapid inflows raise rents and squeeze low earners first. The theory replies that migration creates jobs, true over time, but the first order effects are distributional and profoundly political. A doctrine that removes throttle control is a doctrine that ignores backlash and so destroys the very tolerance it claims to advance. Freedom to move is good. No one should doubt that. It doesn't follow that abolishing external checks is the only or best way to protect that freedom. Inside a democratic order, we already restrict movement in time and place for legitimate reasons: quarantine, safeguarding, court orders, professional licensing, and the key test is proportionality, not absolutism. Open borders fails that test. Ethical claims must meet an engineering constraint. What can be maintained at scale? Open borders has no credible mechanism for adjusting labour standards, voter qualification, or security vetting once membership is open-ended. Trust that it will sort is not a system design. Climate displacement is real and urgent. It requires planned resettlement, regional compacts, adaptation funding and insurance, not the abolition of border policy. Open borders offers an answer that is morally expansive and operationally negligent. And that's why, of course, the 1951 Refugee Convention needs to be rethought and needs to be brought in line with the reality of 2021 movement, because it's designed very much for European movement at the end of the Second World War, not for global movement in the 21st century. Democracy requires that citizens can authorize rules on admission, pace and status. Remove that and you hand a permanent grievance to demagogues. The surest way to poison integration is to tell voters that membership is no longer theirs to shape. We do not live in an open world. We live in a world of paperwork. And the UK runs a points-based system with layered visas, sponsorship duties, health surcharges, caps in some routes, high fees that function as a regressive tax, turnaround times and right-to-work checks push employers towards agencies and grey markets. Asylum backlogs trap people in limbo who are neither allowed to work nor removed. That is not control. That is queue management with human costs. That is not the opposite of open borders. That is chaos. And that is what we have. That is what we live in. So it's not a matter of saying, well, do we want this that we've got, or do we want open borders? No, we actually want something better. Goods. Since leaving the EU single market, small exporters face rules of origin, SPS certification, VAT complications, parcel carrier surcharges, duplication of conformity checks. For perishables and artisan output, friction kills the margin. The theory was sovereignty with agility. What we have got is sovereignty with forms. If you want to send something abroad, it is a nightmare. And the lords of that nightmare are things like FedEx. I've had stuff caught in customs now for 2 months, I think. And the stuff is supposed to be coming back to me, and it's caught in the customs the other way around as well. It is madness. And I would say it is largely a result of Brexit. Professional recognition in terms of services is patchy. Touring creatives, SMEs, universities, deals with visas, data adequacy clauses, fragmented licensing. The UK is a services superpower. We have erected micro barriers that lower our own reach. We have made it more difficult to export what we do best. In short, we have either open borders or we have smart borders. Actually, what we have, we should have either open borders or smart borders. That should be the choice. What we have is thick borders, really badly run, and often delegated to companies that make money simply because they cause problems. That is not how you run a border. So, rebutting the standard pro-open borders talking points, let's do this fairly and briefly. Borders haven't always been. Nor have welfare states, nor has universal schooling, nor has the NHS. Once you have a welfare state, universal schooling and the NHS, the modern combination of mass diplomacy plus social insurance is new, and it works upon managed entry and exit. We do that badly in the UK. We could do it better. Immigrants don't steal jobs. That's also correct in macro terms, but composition matters. Who pays the rent this year? Who pays that rent spike this year matters politically. Management of peace of pace and settlement is the tool that keeps the macro gains and contains the local shocks. Borders create crime. Well, bad border policy incentivizes smugglers. The cure is lawful routes, swift decisions, credible removals for those with no claim. The cure is human beings making decisions, rather than the computer says no or the computer's broken. Abolishing borders abolishes the capacity to police exploitation, but policing exploitation can only be done with common sense and with real people. It cannot be done with this paper shuffling rubbish that we've got in the UK. Open borders raise global GDP. Some gains are plausible. The question is not global output, but domestic legitimacy. If the policy shatters consent, you lose both the policy and the benefits. Humans have always moved, yes, but rights are not only about moving, they're also about remaining securely, forming families, relying on predictable rules. That requires a system with boundaries that the country can maintain. So what we need is a principled middle course, firm borders with generous mobility. We should reject the false binary between cruelty and chaos. The alternative is managed openness. Cut the bureaucracy, not the people. Slash the fees, digitize end-to-end guarantee service standards, restore automatic work permission for asylum seekers after a short period. The target is lawful speed. Expand lawful routes, work routes where shortages are proven. Couple visas to fair wage floors and robust enforcement against undercutting. If a sector cannot meet basic standards without imported exploitation, it should not be importing at all. And then we need to tighten the settlement rules while protecting family life. Be clear about routes to permanent status, stabilise thresholds, speed decisions so people can plan and integrate. That means a working Home Office, which we don't have at the moment. We have a lazy Home Office, which set in under Blunkett, was institutionalised under Theresa May with the term hostile environment, and has only got worse in the last 20 years. We need to enforce our borders and our rules humanely, swift, procedurally fair decisions with timely returns for those with no claim, plus an amnesty-style status resolution for long resident people with strong ties and families. Clarity is kinder than years of limbo. Keeping people in hotels is not human. Keeping people work less is absurd when we are in need of money. And when the country is in need of taxpayers. It is absurd. We need to repair the trade friction for goods, pursue mutual recognition in high-impact areas and trusted trader lanes for SMEs. For services, widen professional recognition and mobility visas for touring performers, researchers, technicians, students. Invest where people live. Migration policy is not a substitute for house building, transport, GP capacity and skills. Without supply, every inflow becomes a zero-sum fight, and even good policy will fail. The freedom to move is valuable. The freedom to belong is indispensable. They are two different things. Open borders collapses the open borders collapses the freedom to belong in pursuit of the freedom to move, and it undermines both freedoms. The UK's problem today is not so much control, but the wrong kind of control. layers of costly bureaucracy that failed to deliver speed, fairness or confidence. This is not a bureaucracy that has been imposed by Europe. It's a bureaucracy that we have created ourselves. The answer is not the abolition of borders, it's competent government. That is what we do not have. Lawful routes that are bigger, faster and cleaner. Firm enforcement that is proportionate and predictable, and serious investment in the places that carry the strain. If you have tried to send goods abroad, if you have tried to negotiate the darker corners of the NHS, if you have tried to deal with education, particularly across borders, you will know that none of this works. None of this works because Britain's bureaucracy gets in the way and hampers progress. And then other countries throw in their bureaucratic machinery to make it even worse. And one part of FedEx, for example, doesn't talk to another part of FedEx. It's not a language problem, it's a system problem. And it's a nightmare. And quite frankly, I throw up my hands in despair. I do not throw up my hands and wave a flag saying open borders. I throw up my hands and say that the systems that we have got are fundamentally wrong. The systems that we have got are managed by a machinery set in motion, or barely set in motion, by the Home Office, devolved to one other ministry or another. But the Home Office does not function properly. Identify that, and we identify the source of the problem. It's a moral and it's a practical position. It keeps presenting itself in every aspect of our life. We need the promise of welcome. We need the promise of a social contract. And what we've got are slogans. What we need is a border that actually works and a process that actually negotiates that border. We have neither.